Violence continues to terrify the Western Cape. The ruling Democratic Alliance has written 12 letters calling for military intervention. And today, here on eNCA, frustrated Mmusi Maimane explained why they're not backing down and why the military must help. Let's take a listen.
Premier Zille had called before for the army. MEC Dan Plato had called before. If people want to reduce this issue to politics, let them be clear that they care about their stomachs and the ANC rather than caring about these South Africans who are being murdered on a regular basis. Unacceptable. Let us bring the army and make sure we bring stability to this community so that we can know what freedom looks like for the people of this country.
Now, Lester September of the Cape Flats Civic Forum chairperson has a different view. He's with us on the phone from the Western Cape. Lester, good to have you with us. Is the military the way to go? Should we see some form of intervention there?
Thank you, Ms. Dutton. Thank you for having me on your show. Let me first just say, you know, when you are experiencing 3,404 gunshots over a period of a few months, wow. When you are having bullets flying over your head into the walls of your home, injuring your children or even killing your children or that of your neighbors, you're not really going to care where the help comes from. But as you say, when we do, what is the most suitable initiative for this? And I'm one of those who believe that the army is not the most suitable support to SAPS.
Why is that?
Well, simply because we have other options and we have better options. When it comes to policing, the city's metro police in Cape Town are the best suited to support SAPS because of their anti-gang training, and they've got a track record with that in that regard. But saying that as well, the call for the army is also an admission that all stakeholders have failed to stop the shooting.
But they have failed, haven't they? So something needs to be done.
Well, the thing is, I'm not so sure again when it comes to the army. In 2015, the army was called in. 3 years later, we're back where we were, if not worse, right? During the same period in 2015, it was reported that we had 2 Metro Police officers covering the equivalent of 8 policing precincts in the then municipal policing area south, which is Mitchell's Plain, Nova Park, Manenbergs, etc. Exactly the same areas where you're getting the 3,404 gunshots. So how can Metro Police have so few officers covering that area in terms of visible policing, right? And then the administration say, no, we should be calling in the army when they are not actually placing Metro Police in those places. Also, just further, gangsterism, trauma, and substance abuse have a causal relationship, right? There's a cause and effect between gangsterism and trauma. The trauma effectively leads to people looking for safety in gangs, may I add, and then there's also substance abuse.
So are you saying that, I mean, this is a real grassroots level problem in the sense that the issues that lead to this need to be addressed first?
Yes, exactly.
But where do you even start?
Well, we need to be looking at social workers, for example, and that is one of the things. You have 3 stages, and that is where I'm saying there's also admission that all stakeholders have failed, because what we should be doing is that social workers should be on the ground. They should be engaging problem households where there is substance abuse or social ills taking place, such as substance abuse and gangsterism. Where that fails, you then obviously have the police being called in, right? Where that fails, you then have the army called in, and that is why I'm saying all these stakeholders have failed.
And so is that a message? So if you had to see the army on the streets, the military on the streets, as you say, it certainly confirms that you've failed. But what do you think it does psychologically to the community?
Well, I mean, people, I feel that there's no hope, right, from that perspective. But as well, the army is they work on the shock and awe sort of way, fight fire with fire, where the long-term effects are reported to be higher levels of mental health issues such as trauma. So you've got a vicious circle taking place. So the difficulty with calling in the army is that they might cause more trauma, and thus you might have higher levels of social ills at the end of it, which possibly is the reason why we are faced with the problems we had, because in 2015 we called in the army to begin with.
And,
you know?
And Les, I'm just wondering what sort of conversations you have with your children about the situation there. I mean, how do you offer them hope? What do you say to them is going to change to make their lives better there?
Look, that's a very difficult question to answer. I'm not a parent, first of all.
Well, children that you know.
Yeah, well, there's, you know, the thing is, what parents are effectively doing, they're just keeping their children inside. And that's not a safe space.
It's not the way to live, is it?
It's not healthy to keep your child inside all day as well. You know, the Cape Flats, that are these small little matchbox houses, there's little space to exist in, and then you have these children there. And then, of course, what also happens is that people drink, they get involved with drugs and that sort of thing. And the children are exposed to all of those things. So effectively, what I would rather go and say that we need to bolster our social workers. The Department of Social Development within the Western Cape needs to have more social workers. My engagement with the Institute of Security Studies reveals that the department itself trained auxiliary social workers, but these social workers are being employed as checkout cashiers. You know, because the department hasn't been hiring because of a lack of funding to them.
Yeah. Okay, Lester, September, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you very much. Okay, cheers.
The Police Minister, Becky Cele, says the men and women in blue are more than capable of dealing with crime in the Western Cape. He was responding to the DA leader's deeply desperate call for the military to take over combating crime.
If we need numbers increase, those are the police numbers we need. We don't need the members of the South African National Defence Force. Remember, the South African National Defence Force is not trained in policing. Is trained on army situation. There are things that they can't tolerate that police tolerate. For instance, police here, if they come here and they are looking for a suspect, that suspect might be allowed to escape rather than shooting all of you. And army is not trained on those things. Let me give you the example. We arrested that guy in Germiston with 8 murders. Police found him sitting with the women in the room. They couldn't shoot him, even though he had AK in the hand. They couldn't shoot him because would have injured the rest of the people. I don't think that soldiers would have tolerated that. So that's why we believe that we need to discuss with those that are calling for the deployment of soldiers here so that we find the better way of doing it. But we fully believe that we have not reached and we are not about to reach the time where we are going to deploy the SANDF members in the Western Cape. Increase the numbers of the police, we'll look at that. Increase the units, we'll look at that. But South African National Defence at this juncture is no.
Let's get some more analysis on the matter now. I'm joined by John Stupart, who is the director at the African Defence Review. John Stupart, very good to have you with us. What are your thoughts on this situation? Clearly something needs to be done. It needs to be done now. What is it?
Well, so, I mean, if you listen to Lester there, you would see that the problem is a very, very complicated one with a whole basket of problems that need to be solved, not just by police, not just by security personnel, by social workers and by various organizations. So you have a very, very complicated, nuanced problem here that isn't just restricted to gangsterism, although obviously that is the most manifest violent symptom that you see here. But I think in a nutshell, I would actually agree with the Minister of Police here in that the Defence Force is not the right solution to the problem.
Why?
Now, at the same time, the police itself, it's obviously the situation in these gang-affected areas is out of control.
Okay, so the police clearly can't cope,
changing.
can they? I mean, it's, you know, proof in that
Yeah,
we've seen an increase
the
in...
police are definitely in over their heads, and I think that's a seriously worrying problem. Now, the minister said right there, right at the end, and almost as a footnote, saying, well, increasing police numbers, we'll take a look at that. And that is actually probably the most important aspect of this. You know, South African national police have been gutted from these areas in the Western Cape for, you know, over many, many years. And I think putting manpower back into these areas is probably the first solution before we even think of the military and deploying the South African National Defence Force. You know, the SNDF, in a nutshell, it's a blunt instrument. It's a sledgehammer. And what you're looking at here is more a sort of surgical scalpel, if you will.
And has the military worked anywhere? I mean, you look at Rio, the military was moved into the favelas to clean them up before the games. That was a disaster.
Absolutely. I would have mentioned Brazil as well. The favelas is a perfect case in point of how you cannot over-militarize your police force or even a certain area and try and quarantine it with pseudo-military forces. All you do is escalate the situation. If you put in people in uniforms with high-powered assault rifles into a situation where they are trained either to do nothing or to open fire at a target and try and kill or incapacitate their target, that's what's going to happen. Either you're going to have a force that's completely useless, or you're going to have a completely overwhelmingly violent reaction to a situation that doesn't require it. And thus you get a very, very severe escalation where that's exactly what you don't want.
Okay, so what is the solution? I know you said it's a complicated matter and it's not just one thing that's going to cure it. But, you know, as Lester was telling us, children are locked up in their homes. We have parents shot dead in front of them. What sort of education needs to happen now from the police force so that it doesn't exacerbate the violence there?
So, funnily enough, we actually had a solution knocking on our doors about 8 years ago during the World Cup, and that took the form of the National Joint Operations Center that was established to create a giant, almost blanket of security around South Africa and around key cities in the country during the World Cup. And that would be a very good starting point. So just because the military is particularly violent, I don't want to be too quick to write them off in that there are some technological tools that they can bring to the table that have been used before in, say, for example, the 2010 World Cup in conjunction with the police. By this, I'm talking about various surveillance technologies, you know, the use of helicopters in sort of monitoring certain areas, and more importantly, communication with police forces on the ground in these areas. And I think plugging that information gap and that intelligence gap in what is essentially a very, very complicated environment that requires good police work, and good police work would involve things like human intelligence. It would require, you know, technological intelligence, satellite imagery, just a lot of things that simply the resources don't exist in the Western Cape in the police environment, and they exist in very limited amounts in the military. So I would suggest mix them together, collaborate and cooperate, and take the things that work from both services if we really want to.
Okay, John, we're going to have to leave it there. Excuse me cutting you off. So, yeah, a lot of thought needs to go into that. And as you say, take the best bits of each department there. John Stupart, Director of the African Defence Review. Still ahead, new revelations on the massacres in Myanmar. How much planning went into the attacks?